microbes that can grow within the hair follicle. It uses sebum production as a fuel source. So this is our gland that produces sebum. If you're not familiar with what sebum is, it's the stuff that provides the oiliness of your skin, keeps it soft. Anyway, so the microbe living in the hair follicle, what happens at puberty is that with the hormone changes and stuff that's going on, you get excess growth of epithelial cells. They can slough off of this follicle and they can form a plug that kind of serves to block up the hair follicle so that the sebum can't escape. So this is caused from cells sloughing off from the hair follicle, this plug is. So as the sebum is being released, continued production of the sebum, and at puberty you can get excess production of sebum, so you got additional sebum being produced. It builds up, and so this gets distended, and so you get the formation of a pimple showing up. In addition to that, because of the excess sebum that you have accumulating here, you now have Propionibacterium growing quite well because there's lots of food there for it. And so that aids in the accumulation of cells and stuff that's happening here. And because Propionibacterium is increasing its growth, it's increasing the number of byproducts that it's producing, that makes it its way into the bloodstream. It starts to draw macrophages and neutrophils and other cells to it, so it becomes inflamed. So you see that, then they release their cytokines to attack the cells that are there, and our cells get damaged. And so you see lesions and stuff that develop at these sites as well. Of course, for treatment, there's a number of things that have been proposed. Of course, keeping the pores open can avoid the blockage that takes place. In some individuals where it's extremely serious, they can give vitamin E shots. I had a cousin when I was growing up that had acne really bad, and he was given vitamin E shots to help cure it up. Not sure what that does, but in other cases they can give drugs that will help reduce production of sebum. Sometimes that can help with acne. And maybe that's what the vitamin E does. Maybe it slows down the production of sebum. I'm not sure. Any questions? I'm being attacked by a bug. Any questions about Propionibacterium? So that brings us then to Staphylococci as part of our normal microbiota. The one that we're going to mention here is Staphylococcus epidermidis. I got it. So this is one of the principal species that colonize the skin. As you can imagine, it's going to protect us from pathogens simply by covering binding sites and consuming nutrients. So it protects us by preventing colonization. It does produce an antimicrobial. That antimicrobial that it produces is effective in killing Propionibacterium acne. So Staphylococcus epidermidis serves to control our Propionibacterium acne population via its secretion of an antimicrobial. And then, real quick, just briefly talk about this yeast that inhabits our bodies. They're lipophilic, meaning they're oil-loving, and where we find them, usually they inhabit the body about 6 months after birth, and then you'll have them for the rest of your life. And you find them usually existing between the layers of cells in the epidermis. Now, as you might expect, normally they're not going to cause any problem, but on occasion, if you're immunodepressed, you can have conditions develop. Sometimes individuals, even that are not immunodepressed, can have conditions like dandruff and rashes, scaly rashes that might form because of this microbe here. Questions? No?
Yeah, is that what Candida is? Candida, is that
No, it's not Candida, although Candida does cause rashes. We're not.
Is Candida a yeast though? Or not?
Yes, Candida is a yeast. Yes. Okay, bacterial skin diseases. I want to talk about a number of them, but I'll introduce one here, and then we're going to talk more about the microbe responsible for it. Bacterial skin infections. Like I said, in most cases, the microbes are not going to be able to penetrate the skin unless there's damage done to the skin, except for in the cases of the hair follicles. Some microbes can infect hair follicles and cause an infection to occur there. Such a condition is called folliculitis. And this is just a hair follicle now that has become inflamed. You can have a furuncle at this place. This is now a boil. So it's an infection that is extended from the follicle to adjacent tissues. So folliculitis is restricted mainly to the follicle. Now a furuncle is that same infection that is spread to other tissues, nearby tissues. And then you can have a carbuncle, which is a much larger infection with multiple pus-seeping areas, follicles. The microbe responsible for this, Staphylococcus aureus. So Staphylococcus aureus is part of our normal flora. Many of us anyway have Staphylococcus aureus. This particular strain, a little bit more virulent than what would be part of our normal microbiota. Basically, the microbe attacks the hair, or attaches to the hair follicle, multiplies and then spreads down into the hair follicle, going deeper and deeper into the subcutaneous layer, releasing toxins and byproducts. If they make it into the bloodstream, can cause major conditions, heart, brain conditions that can develop from this. Staphylococcus aureus is a serious infection that can spread not just from the site of infection, but to other tissues and cause major damage to those other tissues. Let's talk about this microbe and some of the stuff that it does do. We know it's a gram-positive microbe. It grows aerobically, and sometimes it grows anaerobically. Most people will find it inhabiting the nostrils. They prefer moist areas, but they survive fairly well in most environments. People that have boils are shedding large numbers of Staphylococcus aureus from those boils. What are some other conditions that we've encountered or we encounter with Staph aureus? Well, first we can mention food poisoning. If you remember way back at the start of the semester, we identified Staph aureus as causing food poisoning. It produces a heat-labeled toxin. We've just identified the fact that it causes skin conditions like folliculitis. causes a condition called scalded skin syndrome. We see this in infants occasionally. The microbe itself releases a toxin called an exfoliatin. And this toxin, carried through the blood, delivered to the skin, causes the skin to peel away, so that the layers of the epidermis peel away, and the child looks like it has a sunburn. And so the skin's peeling away from what appears to be a sunburn. In fact, it's because of the toxin that's being released. Impetigo, remember we encountered this with Streptococcus pyrodentis as well. This is a skin condition generally caused when you have a cut or something. Both Streptococcus pyrodentis and Staphylococcus aureus can cause this condition. Often it includes pus production, followed by a yellow scab over the lesion. Endocarditis. Endocarditis. This happens if you don't address the situation. The microbe can make its way into the bloodstream and be carried to the heart, and then infection of the heart takes place. And this can be fatal, of course. Toxic shock syndrome. This is a condition that was prevalent in the 70s and 80s due to tampons. Tampons have the ability to harbor the microbe. And so then when you use the tampon, you've introduced the microbe, it produces a toxin, and so you get this toxic shock syndrome that can develop. The toxin is a superantigen. Okay, so now you know what that means. That means that we're turning on many more T cells than is necessary, and so that response is what leads to the damage. In this case here, you can have a drop of blood pressure, you can have kidney failure. Like I said, in the early 1980s, the United States was experiencing about 1,100 cases a year, 1,100 deaths a year from toxic shock syndrome. That's come way down now, down to about 200 deaths a year. Wound infection. In fact, this microbe is the lead cause of wound infections. You'll see pus production, inflammation. Some toxic strains might cause toxic shock syndrome if they're releasing the toxin into the bloodstream. In a lot of cases, it takes 100,000 cells or more to cause the wound infection, unless, of course, there's something for the microbe to hang on to. For instance, like a suture or something like that, this microbe has the ability to produce a clumping factor that when it's adhering to something, it seems to clump better, and this kind of masks it from the immune system. And so on sutures and things like that, it only takes 100 cells or so to cause an infection. Whereas normally, in an open wound, it may take as many as 100,000 cells to cause the infection. So you can see, like Streptococcus pyrogenus, Staphylococcus aureus is responsible for a lot of different conditions. And why do you suppose that would be? Why was Streptococcus cause so many diseases?
Avoid the post-cancer.
What's that?
Avoid
Yeah, well, it has, exactly. Virulence factors. It has several ways of getting around the host defense mechanism. We saw with Streptococcus pyogenes, it had a number of ways of avoiding the host. So does Staph aureus. Almost all strains contain within their cell wall a component called protein A.
Are you talking about staph or strep now?
We're talking about staph still. I'm comparing it to strep, because we talked about strep last time. And they're similar in a lot of ways. Jerry? Protein A is an Fc receptor. Okay, now remember, that means then that the microbe is binding to the Fc region, which then means that it's binding to the part that the macrophage would recognize, and not the part that should be bound to the cell. So now, because it's binding to this Fc receptor, essentially is masked, if you will, cloaked.